Lori Flaquette of Soltar Solutions, and today on Focus Forward, I have a very exciting guest. I've been looking forward to introducing you to him for quite a while. Today I have Chris Miles, the founder, CEO, and creator of Money Ripples. The really interesting thing about Chris is he finds money for entrepreneurs. So let's welcome Chris to the show today. Chris, how are you?
Absolutely wonderful. How are you doing, Laurie?
I'm great. I'm great. So tell us what it is that you do to find money for entrepreneurs, because you know what? Every entrepreneur wants to know that. They all want money.
Absolutely. I mean, every one of us are leaking money in one way, shape, or form, right? We might be leaking money in taxes. We might be leaking money in debt. We might be leaking money in just not taking advantage of those income opportunities within our own businesses. I mean, there's money leaking everywhere. And that's kind of what we're talking about today is really where are those common leaks, because it's everywhere. It doesn't matter who I've met with, I've always found something.
It sounds like a colander. It sounds like the money just goes through the colander. That's what it does in my house. It just goes through, it comes in and out. Sometimes I just think it should just bypass my door and just go right out the other way. So tell us, how do you go about finding money? Because according to what you've told me, you've helped over 500 small business owners save over $34,000. Can that be true?
Yeah, that's on average too. I mean, if you total it all up, it's in the millions, of course, but yeah, absolutely true. I mean, it's just, yeah, there's always money leaking in some way, shape, or form, right? And the biggest way I find it is, first and foremost, you've got to be able to track your money and know where you are today. Because if you don't know where you are today, you'll never know how to get to where you want to go. So you got to know point A before you get to point Z, or Z for our neighbors up north, right?
And down south, that's what they say in Australia as well. Okay, so
right.
When we're looking at that, give us an example of how you can go about tracking money. Because a lot of people, the last thing in the world they want to do is sit and track money. I mean, that's number one that they don't want to do.
Yeah, I like to make money a lot more fun and a lot more simple. I'm kind of a Forrest Gump type of guy. I like to keep things really simple and stupid. And so a real easy first step is just go to a place called mint.com. That's www.mint.com. And you can start tracking your money. And I would recommend doing this for your personal money. For your business, you might want to use something like QuickBooks or something like that. But mint.com, the neat thing about that place is you can electronically have all your transactions from your banks uploaded to that site, just like you would with QuickBooks. But as you start to categorize those things in there, like for example, maybe put in groceries for a certain store like Walmart or Costco or whatever it might be, you put that in there as groceries. You do that once or twice, pretty soon it remembers that and always starts to put in it for groceries. It starts to categorize as groceries. So rather than having to do this horrible little paper check register, it's almost like, it seems almost ridiculous to do it on paper because then you lose it and then you can't figure out what you do with your life and you feel like you're busy and just crazy, right? Instead, keeping a place that's all in one place, you can see all of your savings, your debts, and everything in one place, but you're able to track it and it even does a lot of the work for you. So start with mint.com.
Mint.com, that's really great advice. What about security? Would people be concerned about, uploading their information to a site like that?
They might, and that's perfectly understandable. The thing is, with that kind of site, they're very protected, about as protected as you can get. Very similar to like bank type of security and so forth. I mean, nothing's foolproof. I mean, understand that. But it's going to be about as foolproof as you can get for an online resource, especially for one that's free.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So now you go on, you track your money, you find out where you are today, then what?
Then you start to find the leaks. This is where you start to look at those areas of, where are you spending money in places you weren't expecting? I always ask people, was there any area where you were really surprised? And so when I ask that business owner that, I say, well, what's the surprising area? They'll say, wow, I was surprised. I didn't realize I spent that much on travel, or I spent that much in gasoline, or on education or consulting services, things like that. And so that's a big area. So start to look for those areas that surprise you, the places that you all of a sudden now realize this is it. Like, I didn't know this was here. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. So
what are the most common areas that people are surprised about?
You know, I think the number one area that they're surprised, depending on whether they find it themselves or they have me help them find it. One of the bigger areas, of course, is taxes. That's always a huge one, right? I love to pay taxes as long as it's at the minimal amount possible. And so when it comes to those taxes there, you want to make sure you're looking at that. And it's really tough to tell how much is too much. But if you're an entrepreneur, and especially if you have a corporation, and if you're paying more than 25% of your income into taxes, especially of your personal income, there might be a problem there. You know, it really just depends case by case, but tax is a big one. People are surprised how much they pay in debt every month. People are surprised how much they might be paying in insurances. That's another big one too, where people see a lot of money going to insurance costs, and they don't even realize it's a lot. You know, I just had somebody last night where they were paying about $190 a month for car insurance, and that's just for the two of them. They're a couple in their 50s, and right there I said, you might be overpaying by at least $50 to $100 a month. You know, other places like utilities, like internet, cable, things like that. I've seen people lose a lot of money there, but it's a variety of areas. It just really depends.
Wow, that insurance, yeah, and taxes. I don't know anybody that wants to pay more in taxes. I mean, every once in a while you hear about somebody and you're like, really? Really, you want to pay more in taxes? Oh yeah, I have no problem with it. Okay, good. I personally want to pay the least amount possible, so I'm with you on that. How did you get involved in doing this?
Well, I started out as the traditional financial planner, or broker, as I like to say, and and as Robert Kiyosaki says about brokers, the reason they're called brokers is because they're broker than you or I are, and that's kind of where I was. I started out doing the traditional stuff, and like many financial advisors, was very well intentioned, wanted to help people, but I started to realize it wasn't working the way it should, because there's always a promise of someday in the future, but not about today. Like, what's going to give me cash in my pocket today so I can have more in the future? And what happened is I eventually left that business, started teaching more of the business principle that I teach today, teach people to invest more in their businesses, because that's where your money really should be going. And as I was doing that, of course, the whole Great Recession happened, right? And in that recession, I found myself going from millionaire status to all of a sudden flip-flopping and being over $1 million in debt, and over in the hole by more than $10,000 each and every month. And the crazy thing is, I didn't even know it. I saw the signs. I saw that my debt was increasing, and I wasn't sure why my savings were being depleted until I tracked it. And then next thing I know, I'm in the hole by over $10,000 a month. I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I don't know if, I'm sure many people, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you've been in situations, maybe not as extreme as this, but you've seen this situation before. And what happens is that it just kills you, because not only are you losing money there, but it's consuming your mind. And when it consumes your mind, you start stressing out, you get desperate. And when you get desperate, nobody wants to do business with you. And I started to recognize this, that I was having money leaks with my income, because I wanted to get out, but I was so desperate to get out, it was hard for people to want to do business with me, right?
Exactly.
And I think there's a lot of people out there even like that today. And what I recognize is, how am I going to get out of this? And just like every amazing experience in your life, I knew it was my calling to try to overcome that. And so I did. And in a matter of a few years, paid off almost $800,000 in debt. I ended up, flip-flopping it so that I ended up being back in the black and not in the red, back in the black again. And so it took a lot of work, but that's where these very money tips these cash flow tips came from, was from that real life experience. And there's still stuff I apply today. I mean, just a few months ago, I reevaluated my situation again, found another $1,819 a month to free up in my life, to make it a little bit, to make that cash flow even bigger, so you have this extra surplus all the time. And that's where financial freedom comes from. When I realized that I had that extra surplus, I calmed down, had greater peace of mind, and the next thing you know, I'm making more money because I relax. And when I relax, just like all the rest of you, you make more money. Versus if you go to a networking event, when they're desperate, they're like people throwing business cards at you. They're like Chinese stars, just like giving you paper cuts as they're flying by, because they're so desperate for your business, right? And you want to run and hide. And you don't want to be that way. You want to relax. And so it's amazing how there's money leaks in places you don't even realize, because of what's going on up here, as well as what's going on in your pocketbook or your purse.
So in other words, what you're saying about your money leaks, about these money leaks, is there are things that you don't really even understand or really even, or you're not even aware that you're spending money on them. So for instance, like a lot of people say, oh, you know what, if you go 5 days a week and you have Starbucks coffee, that's $5.50, and you add all that up. So those aren't the things that you're talking about, right?
Not always, but that can be a factor, like the latte factor you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
Definitely, that's not a bad thing. But I've noticed that there's other areas you can find a lot more money, because you might find a few dollars here or there, and it could be a few $100 a month. But the average person I work with usually finds thousands. And so that's part of it. Just like last night, that same couple, we found not only are they overpaying about $50 to $100 on their auto insurance, they're also overpaying maybe about $90 a month on their cable, internet, TV, phone, those kind of bills, right? But one of the biggest areas we found it for them was that there was over $2,000 a month we could free up just on their debts, and then just by like refinancing. And so there's all kinds of areas that you can find money in.
Mm-hmm. Well, understanding that is really important. A lot of people don't even look at those statements. I worked with a client once, and she was paying. I saved her in one night, and that's not my forte, but I saved her in one night $5,000 because she had a very high debt load, and she was paying a very high rate. And we called and we renegotiated those, and $5,000. I mean, that's huge, huge. And you think about that over the period of time. So in looking at it, one question I have is, like, how much debt, and maybe this is the wrong question, but how much debt would be like an appropriate percentage of debt for an entrepreneur to be carrying? Do you have a...
Wow. That's a good question. It depends. I look at debt as neither good nor bad.
Okay.
It's just, it could be a good or bad tool, though, depending on who it is, right? It's more the person that uses it, not the debt itself. I think for some entrepreneurs, especially those that may be just starting out, or those that really don't know what they're doing, they don't have a clear message, for them, maybe having any debt is bad, especially in their business, right? But on the flip side, you can see that there's business owners that can use debt really well. Give you an example. I love the TV show Shark Tank. I don't know how many of you watch that as well, but I love that show. And one of the people was actually a restaurant. It was an ice cream restaurant called Sub-Zero, which my wife and I love. It's here in Utah. It's in Idaho, Washington, California, Arizona. And they were on Shark Tank, and they were asking for about $360,000 for 15% of their company. And what was interesting is that they had just gotten out of a bad partnership, had to pay off that partner $500,000 to get out. And the sharks were almost dumbfounded. They said, wait a minute. So you're going from one bad partnership and you're trying to jump into a new one. But here's even the real problem, is that they're going from $1.5 million to $4 million this year. So if it's that good, why do you need to give away your equity in the company that's already successful, where they probably don't really need the money? But see what they said, and this is what tipped me off. They said in that conversation, they said, well, we just, for the first time in our business, we got out a loan for $285,000. And you could tell it really hurt them. The problem with that is that the sharks knew better. They said, no, don't give up your equity, because what if that $4 million company becomes a $20 million company? They gave up 15%. Well, now they're saying, okay, well, hey, let me just hand off a good chunk of that money here. That's $3 million this year alone. Versus if they would have just gotten a loan for, let's say, as an extra $360,000, even with the interest over the next 5 to 10 years, it might only be $400,000 to $450,000. And so in a situation like them, debt can be really good. And so I don't really look at the percentages. The amount of debt is not the big thing. It's the amount you're paying every month is the kicker. And I want those payments to be as low as possible. Because if the worst were to happen, especially if you're an entrepreneur and your income goes like this, it's going up and down, you want to have low payments so that as you're doing this, you can still keep making the payments, and you have some extra cash reserves just in case you have a crazy period of time in your business. So you always have that safety and security. The lower the payment, the better. I don't care how much debt it is. The lower the payment, the better.
Okay, so what you're an advocate of is, if you need a certain amount of money, what you do is you borrow that money over a longer period of time to bring your payment not nearly as high, right?
Absolutely. Lower interest and longer terms can be great. I like to have choices and options. I think that's where real freedom comes from. I believe that freedom always comes from having more options. When you're stuck with a real large payment, it makes it really hard to be free. And so, for example, when you have a 15-year mortgage, again, if your income fluctuates or something happens in your life, it's going to be really hard to make that payment. Versus having a 30-year mortgage, it's going to be a lot easier. And that goes for business loans too. I mean, just a few months ago, I refinanced my small business loan to be able to stretch out the terms for a few more years. And I gave them proposals. I said, here's what I want, and here's why. Because I want to put a lot more money into marketing this year. So as a result, I know that if I put more money in marketing, especially in the right kinds of marketing, I'm going to produce way more than what the monthly payment is. And that's how you leverage debt to be good. It's when people use debt and they just consume it, they just blow it, and then they wonder how they're going to pay the bills. That's when it becomes bad.
So it's very interesting that you mentioned marketing, because often people will tell me, I can't afford to market. And I'm like, you can't afford to market? Then you can't afford to be in business. Because if you're not marketing, you're not growing. So I think that there's also ways that people can, once they understand what their brand is and they have that down and they understand who their market is, that's the other thing that's really important. A lot of people will say, everyone is my market. No, everyone is not your market. Everyone's not going to understand that everybody doesn't have a need for your product, nor will they be able to have that emotional tie to the brand. So figuring out the market and then figuring out your brand and then your message and then who you're going to deliver that. There are ways that you go about marketing that are very low cost. A lot of people don't understand that. They're like, oh, I'm just going to buy a $5,000 ad here, or I'm just going to buy that. But it's really important how that strategy fits into your whole business. And it's not a one-up. That's the other thing people don't understand. Marketing is over a period of time. It's not something you do once or twice and you expect the phone to be ringing off the hook. So one of the things, so it's great that you're doing that. It's great that you're going into marketing. I think you have a phenomenal business model and it sounds really great. One of the questions I have is, you talked a little bit about your tips a minute ago. So how do we find out about those tips, and what kind of things would be included? Just give us a few.
All right, so here's some key tips here. The first one, like I mentioned before, is track it. You got to track your money to know where you are, because you can't just move forward blindly. You got to make sure you know where you are. So make sure you track your money. Use mint.com like I mentioned. 2 is find ways to produce more money. You know, Lori, just like you said, you really want to make sure that you're finding ways to increase your business. How can you increase the amount of value you offer to other people? Because dollars are the value you create. How can you increase that value, and how can you market that value? How can you bring it to the marketplace and to the world? So doing that, find ways to earn more money. There's so many people that just have this complex. They don't think about how they can make more money. They wonder if they're worth it or if they should raise prices. I've had doctors that wouldn't raise prices for 10 years. And I say, listen, if you got a person that's a normal employee wage person doing minimum wage and they're making more every year, why shouldn't you? So find ways to do that. You know, saving on taxes. A big key here is if you're making at least 5 figures, you should probably look into setting up some type of corporation. And when I say 5 figures, bringing home 5 figures especially. 1, you want to make sure you protect yourself, especially from lawsuits. Because why build a huge business and only have it taken away? And then 2, there's an awesome tax savings when you're a business owner. And especially when you legitimately have a business. And so governments actually are incentivizing you to do it. And I've seen this in about 90% of cases. People are not taking advantage of this. Of the business owners I've worked with, 90% of them will save something in taxes because they're just not doing it. Third tip, fourth tip is refinancing. Looking for ways to refinance your loans. Paying off the ones that have a low balance with a really high payment, that kind of ratio. I call it the cash flow index. So that kind of ratio, make sure you're paying off the one that you can pay the least amount of dollars to get the freed up the most cash flow. There's a lot more freedom and security in that. 5, and this one's a little bit risque for people, but if I've heard people say, I wish I could invest more into my business because I know it can make huge returns, but I don't know where to get the money. But then they'll take money and stuff it into like an IRA, which doesn't really give them any tax benefits because they have to pay taxes on it someday, especially when you're a business owner. Different when you're an employee, but when you're a business owner, if you've got that money, put it into your business, especially if you know where to put it. And so don't just put money in a place where you can't touch it. I like to stay liquid. I like to keep my money available so I can put it into my business whenever I feel like. So maybe look at stop the retirement contributions temporarily, not permanently. Another way is you can pay minimums on your loans. Instead of paying all these extra payments to them, how about paying minimum payments so then you can increase your income? Because if I'm putting an extra $1,000 a month to my loans, but I could take the $1,000 a month and produce $2,000 a month, well, why not do that and still pocket the other $1,000 a month, right? So things like that.
So is this the kind of thing that you help your clients figure out? Because while I'm hearing what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, absolutely. But I'm thinking about my life, how busy I am. I'm a business owner. I'm a consultant. I work with clients. Now I have the television show. I have a lot of different things going on. I really am going to be honest with you. I don't have time to figure all these things out. I don't have time, nor do I have a desire to do it. I want the result. I absolutely want the result. What I don't want to go through is the pain to do it. So is this the kind of client that you would be helping? Someone like me?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And I think of it this way, because you're absolutely right. It's not like the most fun thing for a lot of people to do, and especially when you're so good at what you do, you should be putting all your effort there, right?
Yes.
The thing I would really remind people, though, is it's kind of like the 6-minute ab ordeal that we have going on. Like, everybody wants to have 6-minute abs, right? And if you're doing it right when you're working out, you're going to spend at least a few hours a week working out total. I just tell people spend a few minutes a week and watch what will happen. You don't have to invest that much time. If that means that little investment of time can open up huge opportunities and create freedom, and at the same time allow you to relax, and then your income increases at the same time. So it's like this, instead of a toilet bowl where things are getting worse, instead it's like this funnel where things are getting better. And that's what you want.
I love that analogy. That's fabulous. So we're almost wrapping up the show, but I do want to ask you a question, because I come from New York, and people in New York tend to not necessarily, they're not budget conscious people. And I think maybe one of the reasons why that is because things are very expensive, and because we want to do what our friends are doing in New York, always. So we're not maybe looking at the amount of money that we have. But the big difference is, I think the people in New York can understand how they can make more money to do the things that they want. Like, I see amazing things go on. People tell me, no, they can't afford that house for $20,000 for the season. I'm going back 20 years, you can imagine now. 20 grand for the season, and there they are going to the house every weekend. So in looking at it, they understand the concept of making more. They understand that. Here I am living in the Midwest, and it's very interesting because it seems like people are more budget conscious. They have definitely a ceiling. They are, they're more good at, they're better at putting their little, money in their different places. So they're more pragmatic about money, but I think that they're less inclined to think, oh, I can raise my income. So do you think it's a regional thing, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great point. I've worked with people all over the U.S. and Canada, and, I'm thinking of specific examples, and I can definitely see that being the case. With people I've worked with in Manhattan, for example, I've seen that. I remember I had one guy that was such in a bad toilet bowl of his finances that, we had to really get creative with it, and still found about $800 a month to keep him out of bankruptcy. But, I've noticed that Midwest, same thing. It is various cultural. I've noticed here in Utah, people are so adverse to debt, which is actually one of the reasons why there's so much bankruptcy, because they spend so much of their cash trying to pay off their debts, they have no savings, and then they go bankrupt. So I think there are definitely cultural differences, and that's why I make the point that there's always money leaks. There's always ways to find money. And it's important to remember, too, that it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then make.
Yep, absolutely. That's fabulous advice. So, Chris, I'm so sorry we have to end the show. I hope you'll come back again and talk to us some more about this, because this is something that entrepreneurs, business owners, and average people need to get control of. So thank you so much for being on Focus Forward today.
Hey, I'm Robert Dempsey with today's Tip from the Net. And today I want to talk to you about how to get more people to your Facebook page, because let's assume that your target market is in fact on Facebook. So there's a couple ways to do that. First of all, when you create your business Facebook page, you as your account, which is actually separate from the the Facebook page that you create. You can say, okay, I want to operate as like my business page, or I want to operate as me. Either way, what you can do is, first of all, you want to invite all of your friends to Facebook. And actually, if you type into Google, there's a little script you can get that will allow you to select all of your friends and invite them all to your Facebook page. Because let's say you have, hundreds or possibly thousands of friends on Facebook, you can do that. So the first tip is to invite all of your current friends to your page on Facebook. The next thing is to make it obvious that you have this Facebook page available and point people to it. So where can you do that? You can mention that inside of blog posts. You can mention that, well, you can have the Facebook like box actually in the sidebar on your blog is a pretty common tactic. And also just operating inside of Facebook and letting people know, hey, I'm offering, like say an event. If you have a teleconference, if you're doing a webinar, if you have a video that you've posted onto your site, what you can do is when you're in Facebook and interacting with other people, you can link over to your page. Say, hey, I just did a great interview with so-and-so, check it out, and then have that inside of Facebook. Now, the key is that people, when they're inside of Facebook, they really like to stay inside of Facebook. So far, I've seen that, although I'm starting to test that theory with some other of our clients. But for the most part, though, people will spend lots of time inside of Facebook, so don't send them elsewhere. So that means if you have a video, you want to upload that video directly to Facebook and then point it out to other people on Facebook. So some pretty simple strategies that you can use to get more people to your page. So that's it for today. I am Robert Dempsey, and I will see you next time for Tips from the Net.